Hey there guys, I'm back to another game review. Today we'll be talking about Marvel's Spider-Man on the PlayStation 4. Just for some context, I love Spider-Man. I mean, seriously, he is by far my favorite superhero ever. I was introduced to the character in the first Sam Raimi film with Tobey Maguire, and his recent appearances in the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Tom Holland have been such a treat. The Ultimate Spider-Man comic by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley is my favorite version of the comic book hero, and the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon stays pretty faithful to that version of the character. So, when this game was announced during E3 2016 of Sony's presentation, I was really excited, like extremely excited I should say. On top of that, the game is being developed by Insomniac Games, who have worked on the original Spyro trilogy and the Ratchet & Clank series. I adore the Ratchet & Clank franchise, and I was excited to see what this team could do with a character like Spider-Man. We wouldn't get any more information on the game until the next E3 in 2017, where we got the first bit of gameplay shown. It looked pretty good and even showed Miles Morales being in the game. Common complaints for this gameplay presentation was the amount of QuickTime events, which is understandable. It did look really reliant on QTEs, but Insomniac Games assured us that this wasn't the case. The next big info dump on Marvel's Spider-Man was in May 2018 on Game Informer. They covered a lot of new information on the game, like doing interviews and first-hand impressions, but most importantly, we got a release date and future DLC expansions announced. Finally getting a solid release date of September 7th, 2018 and the various editions announced had me more than pumped for the game. Also, during the interviews with Game Informer with the devs, Insomniac Games seemed very excited to work on a character like Spider-Man and were taking this project very seriously. They were taking notes from previous Spidey games to make sure that their Spider-Man game did everything right. The E3 2018 demo was good enough to keep the hype going and didn't give too much away either. Alluding to the sixth member of the Sinister Six was a great way to end the demo video. This would be the last video/trailer I watched related to Spider-Man PS4 before its release. I just wanted to play the game at this point. So now with some context as to where I stand with Spider-Man and Insomniac Games, what do I think of Marvel's Spider-Man on the PS4? So let's start off with that story. The story for Spider-Man PS4 takes place 8 years into Peter's career as a masked hero. The Rogues Gallery of Villains is at it again, featuring the Kingpin, Mr. Negative, and Electro. It's up to our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man to put a stop to their madness. Meanwhile, Peter Parker's life is up and going as always, with notable supporting characters like Mary Jane Watson, Aunt May, and Miles Morales. The biggest difference between this game and other Spidey games is the dynamic between Peter Parker and Spider-Man. This is a big reason why I love Spectacular Spider-Man, the cartoon, and the Ultimate Spider-Man comic. It's even demonstrated pretty well in the Spider-Man Homecoming movie. Actions of Spider-Man affect the life of Peter Parker and vice versa. This was my biggest hope for this game's story, and Insomniac Games really delivered. The other relationship that I surprisingly loved was MJ and Peter, and it's not for obvious reasons, but it's because of how much they conflict with one another. Another surprise for this game was how the pacing was handled. With the amount of characters in this game, I thought that it would be a jumbled mess in some regards, but no, it was paced really well. This could have been affected by how much of the side stuff I was doing in between the story missions, so just keep that in mind. One complaint I have with the story is how predictable it was. I mean, I understand Insomniac Games only used Marvel created characters for this game, so it does make it easy to predict what's going to happen next from a huge Marvel/Spider-Man fan. There were some things I didn't see coming, but for the most part, the story is very predictable. Now, does that make the story bad? Yes and no. I bet if someone who had a basic knowledge of Spider-Man, like literally just his origins, he got bit by a spider and now he's Spider-Man, they would probably thoroughly enjoy this game's story. As a person who knows a lot about Spider-Man and his characters, the plot was okay at best. The ending was exceptionally good though, like it is setting up a sequel and I cannot wait to see what they have planned. The story is definitely the weakest part of the game, but this is the best Spider-Man story in a video game to date. Moving on to the gameplay, there are many different gameplay bits to experience throughout this 16-hour adventure. For the most part, you'll be playing as Spider-Man swinging through the city and beating up enemies. The web swinging is phenomenal. The way Spider-Man moves throughout New York City and how fast he can travel is super fun. The momentum-based movement in this game is fluid and almost second nature. Because of how good the web swinging is in this game, I never used fast travel. The combat in this game is also a joy to experience. The combat is all about timing and using Spidey's webs and gadgets. You'll have to time your Spidey sense properly or else you'll end up taking a lot of damage. Use Spidey's webs to your advantage to take out enemies. You can pin them against the wall or the floor and that'll count as a defeated enemy. That aspect of combat is my favorite because it makes sense for the Spider-Man character. You can also use your webs to pick up throwables and deal damage to enemies. The gadgets are pretty fun to use. For the most part, I only use the spider trap and bomb. The other ones didn't really fit my playstyle when doing side missions and such. The combat also has a learning curve to a certain extent. If you go into this game thinking it's a Batman Arkham game, you'll get your butt kicked very quickly. TBH said it best on his stream saying,
combat is actually challenging and not just button mashing. Yeah, I already noticed it's like Batman, but the what's the word I'm looking for? The window for errors is a lot smaller. Like, you have to dodge quicker, it seems like. Batman's a lot easier, I can tell already.
And I think that describes the combat perfectly. The Arkham games would have Batman do a counterattack rather than a dodge. In Marvel's Spider-Man, you have to think about dodging enemy attacks while doing damage to them as well. This makes the combat more satisfying to pull off. My only major complaint with the combat is the camera at times, like it'll obscure your vision when fighting, which sucks. Other than that, the combat is pretty solid. The upgrading of Spider-Man and his gadgets is done by gaining experience and using tokens that'll be collected by doing side missions. The side missions in this game could range from a random crime to taking out demon bases to a challenge mission. Side missions in this game don't feel like a chore to complete. For the most part, they're all fun to play through. My least favorite side missions are definitely the drone missions, forcing me to web swing in a certain direction / angle, and it can get pretty tough when you're trying to go for all 3 tokens for that mission. Revealing more of the map is done by fixing these towers and taking pictures of landmarks. The towers aspect is reminiscent of Assassin's Creed, which does rub some people the wrong way. Personally, it's a staple in modern open world games today, so I don't have an issue with it. Taking pictures of landmarks throughout the city is pretty fun. The collectibles are also fun to look out for, mainly the backpacks. But in all seriousness, how has no one found one of these 55 backpacks? Anyways, the stealth sections in this game are fantastic. Many different ways to tackle these sections, and the gadgets makes these parts really fun. Moving on to other bits of gameplay outside of Spider-Man, while playing as Peter Parker, you'll mostly be doing these puzzles that require you to fix a path of electricity from point A to point B. These puzzles kept the gameplay refreshing, giving you a nice break from the web swinging as Spider-Man. These puzzles also remind me of the puzzles in Ratchet & Clank. Sections where you have to play as Mary Jane are pure stealth sections. Like, if you get caught, you have to start from the last checkpoint. At least with Spider-Man stealth sections, you can fight back after getting caught. I'm a huge fan of Sly Cooper, a stealth PlayStation platformer, so I guess that's why I love the MJ part so much. But yeah, I believe I've covered everything when it comes to the gameplay. The web swinging is amazing, the combat is satisfying to pull off, and the stealth sections are a joy to play through. Besides the camera messing up sometimes and my personal hate for the drone missions, the gameplay for Marvel's Spider-Man is near perfect for an open world Spidey game. Presentation wise, I mean, come on, the game is absolutely stunning in terms of graphics. The music for this game fits the Spider-Man tone. The performances by the whole cast is great. Yuri L, the actor who plays as Spider-Man in this game, did a pretty good job. I was a bit skeptical going in, I'm not gonna lie. I wish Josh Keaton reprised the role as Spider-Man, but he actually played Shocker in this game, which I was honestly shocked by. No pun intended, actually, really pun intended. Anyways, the writing can be hit or miss for some, especially when it comes to the Spidey one-liners, but personally, I didn't mind it. I did have one graphical hiccup with this NPC inside of Wilson Fisk, and I've seen some other graphical mess-ups within other people's playthroughs. There are a bunch of Easter eggs to look out for if you're a huge Spider-Man fan like myself, so keep an eye out for that. And even Marvel fans that, like, you know, Daredevil and all that stuff, keep an eye out for, you know, certain buildings and certain, you know, collectibles and all that stuff. So, but overall, the presentation is pretty good. So what are my final thoughts on Marvel's Spider-Man? Insomniac Games really did take their time with this game. While working on a character like Spider-Man and his history within video games, the devs truly have brought us the best Spidey game to date. The story tackles the dynamic between Peter Parker and Spider-Man, which is awesome to see. The gameplay is almost perfect for an open-world Spider-Man game, and the presentation is really solid. My personal gripes with the game, like the story being predictable and the one-off graphical hiccup, shouldn't deter you from this game's greatness. greatness. I had a lot of fun with this game purely from the gameplay alone. I plan on completing this game 100% soon, which I've never done with a PS4 game before, and I haven't done in a while with a video game in general. You have a 16-hour adventure in front of you by just doing the story, but if you do the other stuff like all the side missions and all that other, wumbo jumbo, that's an additional 14 hours, which that'll clock in at around 30 hours. If you have a PS4, pick this game up even if you're not a huge Spider-Man fan, and if you don't own a PS4, what are you doing? Get one and play this game. It's one of the best games released this year so far, and will go down as the best open world Spider-Man game ever. So that is all I have for today. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you guys have not already, you can subscribe. I put new videos up every single Saturday. Follow my social media accounts, Facebook and Twitter. I put updates to my future videos on there. And yeah, I think that is about it. Thank you guys for watching this video once again, and I'll see you guys next time with more videos. Game on, gamers.